In this video, I'm going to take you through the Google Core update and the Google Spam update that's literally just been released. So it's about a day into it. I'm going to take you through sort of what it means for the search landscape, some of the highlights, some of the early impacts as well, which has been quite devastating across a number of sort of high profile sites. If you stay to the end, I'll take you through some of the best tweets, some of the best reaction that I've seen about this as well. And I'll also give you some of my final thoughts on what this means for SEO. To kick it off, I think it's quite obvious that the three sort of core highlights that have come out of this are that Google are looking to sort of tackle this mass content creation. And they're always put for the purpose of manipulating search results as well. So we know that since the rise of sort of AI, ChatGPT, for example, coming into the masses, that this has enabled sort of one-click content creation. The web has naturally become bloated because of this, and it's not unfair to say that it's probably a worse space because of this. So I don't think it's a huge surprise that this was something that was going to be specifically targeted. I think what was interesting was that Google didn't exclusively say that this update was just targeting AI, which sort of suggests that programmatic SEO sites that have enjoyed consistent rankings, high revenue, for many years really now, could actually be under the microscope a little bit. So it'd be interesting to sort of see what happens with that. The second point with this is, as it always has been trying to do, sort of tackle this sort of low quality, quote unquote, content that's been built on expired domains. And these are essentially sites that have strong backlink profiles from over the years. A webmaster, a user picking up this site, sticking a site on top of it, and essentially that site flying because of the previous domain history. So Google's going to try and look to essentially clamp down on the success of those sites in particular. And the final point as well is content put live on a third-party site with the goal of sort of ranking. And actually what I thought was interesting was Google always talk about, sort of any practice of manipulating search results, manipulating search rankings, sort of things like this. Now, of course, that's totally obvious, right? But I think one of the key considerations here, and where it's a little bit chicken and egg, is they're very much trying to promote users to create content for the user first. Now, the flip side to that is, unfortunately, you sort of have to some degree, focus your content around what a search engine or a Google crawler is looking for, so that it can get the usership, right? I think it goes without saying that if you purely create content that is focused only on the users, the likeliness or the chance to actually rank that content is probably far smaller. So there's always going to be an element with this that when you're writing for the user first, it would be incredibly naive to not consider the types of results that Google is already showing in the SERP for that specific keyword. So I don't agree that just focusing on the people is the right way to go about it. You simply have to take into account what Google is showing in the SERP for that given keyword, and make sure that you use that at least as a bit of a baseline when creating content, when scoping content. Otherwise we may not get the viewership. So I think it's always important to bear that in mind. I think as well, it's easy for us to think exclusively in our niches when we think about Google and we think about content creation. But in a lot of cases, we also need to think about, if the site I'm creating or the business I have doesn't necessarily need a lot of, this high value content, or what Google deems as high value, then how do those sites stand a chance of appearing in the SERP? And I think if I just pull up the documentation that they have around creating sort of helpful, reliable, people first content, the opening lines here, does the content provide original info, reporting and research? Does it provide substantial, complete or comprehensive descriptions of a topic? Does it provide insight and analysis? Again, like if we're talking about deep subjects that have multiple conversation points, that essentially we have enough content to go through all of these different sections and actually add to, then of course that makes sense. But if we look at like a local business such as these guys here, AK Roofing, now I know that these guys rank for Roofing Guildford, for example. If I open up the Ahrefs just as a bit of an example, Roofers Guildford, local business. What are these guys meant to do with information such as that? If they've got a service page that is around, their roofing service, what more can they do to provide value to the user, assuming that they have all the value that the user needs, or all the content, I should say, that the user needs already on their web pages. So I know that obviously Google sort of it rolls out these updates specifically to go after the YMYL niches, the casinos, the medic, the sort of healthcare, the finance niches, etc. But if I was the owner of a site such as this, and I was seeing this big update and points to documentation around sort of creating people first content, I would feel a little bit left in the lurch and a bit unsure as to how to proceed, right? So I think with all of this, the first thing to consider is that really we have to think about Google when creating content. We simply just can't only put sort of the people first. And even if we do put the people first, well, is this going to satisfy kind of the content need that Google's looking for to actually serve it in the SERP? So I think that's the first point here. Obviously, the second point on expired domains, be really interesting to sort of see how Google looks at this and sort of judges that a site has been built purely for the manipulation of search. We know from sort of testing in the past with old sites that expired domains can work in some capacity, even though that Google themselves have actually said in the past that actually, expired domains don't actually do a great deal. If I jump into the SEO Roundtable article here, this was a tweet from 2022 that essentially said, build a new site if you want. Don't assume there's old and tasty SEO juice to lick up just by placing a site on an old domain. Now we know that this isn't strictly true. And of course, there's still a little bit of ambiguity that sort of falls within this. But it will be fascinating to sort of see how Google judges that, a site has just been built for that. And again, it's not just a legitimate business that has changed hands or they've picked up that name, for example, which is also incredibly common. So common to the point where, Google have also said that with expired domains, they do need to be super cautious. And they carry on here saying sometimes people revive expired domains and they really kind of run the old website again. We know that that's super common. Sometimes people pass the website from one owner to another, the domain changes, ownerships change. So again, there's this huge gray area with something like expired domains whereby Google will not be able to prove absolutely that something has been built for the manipulation of search ranking manipulation. And therefore, we're going to probably see a great deal of domains that do get kicked out the index, probably unjustly. So it'll be interesting to sort of see what happens with that. We haven't really seen too much that's come out of the initial reaction in the last day that has said that has been the case. But it's looking likely that very much we could see a number of expired domains all falling out of the index. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on the ones that we have anyway. I think out of all of this, it's really important to consider the spirit of what Google are trying to do, which in essence is to cut down the success of mass-produced content. Now, if we look at two of the sort of core topics that they've pointed to, which is mass-produced content, which has obviously been doing very well in the SERP, being put on top of an expired domain, and that content being able to leverage the authority of that expired domain and a user getting some really good success out of it. That's what they're trying to tackle. So of course the hope is that there's little to no collateral damage in respect of a genuine site being picked up from auction because that business needs that domain or a domain changing hands because a business has changed hands, and actually Google won't hit these types of sites. And there's always this sort of underlying trust that you have to put in Google to be able to pick out when a site has been just built or mass produced, I should say, stuck on top of the domain for the purpose of just ranking basically. But I do think, as they do with all these things, they'll go after the YMYL high niches, high value niches, I should say. That's where they're going to put the bulk of their time, money, and resource in front of. Everything else will come either later or sort of secondary to that anyway. The sort of third part to this is parasite SEO. But interestingly, Google said that we're not necessarily anticipating a rollout or an update that will impact parasite SEO in this update, but it will be something that's going to come in May. So parasite SEO is essentially the essence of a page ranking due to the sheer strength of the domain that page has been put on. So since September, I think it was, we've actually seen a rise in domains such as Outlook India, LinkedIn Pulse, Herald Times. There's been quite a few that have been quite notorious for pretty much ranking for any keyword that has been stuck onto the domain. Now, of course, the benefit of this is that it's almost a way to hack, quote unquote, a way to the top of the SERPs very quickly, with minimal effort and minimal cost as well. So Google, interestingly, as I said, has said that an update focused on this will come in May. So whether this is to sort of speak to the big publishers to try and get them to slow down and stop doing this, or get their editorial policies in place that essentially culls a lot of this stuff, remains to be seen. I think the hypothesis for this really will be, though, that SEOs will look at this and say, okay, we've got a couple of months to really squeeze as much out of this as we can. Let's double down on it. So I actually think we're going to end up seeing more parasite search listings in the SERP because of this announcement between now and May. And then in May, let's see what happens. I think Forbes will really be the litmus test for this. Forbes seems to be able to manage through every single update. I don't think they've ever been hit. I don't think they've ever been targeted. We know that they've been quite primed for, pretty much ranking for everything. From a Google perspective, they think they've got experts in pretty much every sort of mass consumable product category that exists. So I think if we see Forbes being impacted in May, then we know Google's actually listening and they're genuinely trying to do something about the SERPs. Instead of just, again, promoting the big brands as they typically do through one of these updates. So watch this space. We'll keep a close eye on it. What I think will be really interesting is if the parasite page is actually quite close to the domain in respective relevancy and category, what Google will actually do with those types of pages. Now, I could understand if we've got pages that are promoting payday loans that sit on an educational site, well, that's quite easy to see that payday loan piece clearly has no relevance to the educational site and it should be hit. And Google actually offer some examples of what these can look like as well. So if we come into the spam policies up at the top here, the one right at the top, an educational site hosting a page about payday loans. The second one, a medical site hosting a third-party page about best casinos. These are quite obvious sort of site reputation abuse, as they call it. It's quite obvious that those pages have been put there for the purpose of ranking and leveraging existing sites' authority, and therefore a user that would return or go to this medical site via another page that's actually native to that site, and then navigating to this page would naturally be confused, bad user experience, etc., etc. But if we do, for example, had a page that was ranking something like the 5 best HR softwares, and the owner of that piece of content had put their listings at 1 and 3, for example, what will Google do with a page such as that? Because you could argue that HR software is closely tied to LinkedIn, which of course is the professional network, it's the business network. And so you could say, or you could make an argument at least, that page is quite relevant for LinkedIn's target audience. So I think it'd be interesting to see what would happen with those sorts of posts and pages. And actually, I think the long-term sort of hypothesis will be that parasites will still work, but you just have to be a lot more closely related to the host domain, basically, or at least package up the content so that it's a little bit more applicable to most of what the content that already exists on the domain is. Let's see. So some of the early reaction as well. We've actually seen a number of sites that have been fully de-indexed from Google. Haven't seen this before, or at least not for a very, very long time from memory. So I've listed a few here, but it does seem to be that sites are sort of being wiped left, right, and center. So if I actually just show you the strength of this domain, I'm sure it's one that you've come across before, fresherslive.com. Just have a look at the metrics here from Ahrefs, generating an estimated 7 million visits every single month from 2.5 million keywords. Now, if I do a site search on this, I'd actually just thought it'd come back in then, but doing a site search actually returns 0 results. So that's 7 million down to 0 pretty much overnight, which is crazy. So Google clearly are making it an example of some of the big sites. I think for sure, if you've been very open about manipulative practices that are working in Google, guess what? They're going after you if they haven't already. And I think there's a big lesson to be learned in that as well. Some final thoughts here. So I do think killing mass exclusive AI sites is a good thing. If sites are being pumped out with thousands of articles on them for the sake of ranking, they're not really adding anything to the user whatsoever, and they're potentially being ranked in place of a site that actually adds a better user experience, for lack of a better word. You know, it adds information gaps, actually helps the user. It's a site that a user would take more value from. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think the state of search would be in the absolute pits if this sort of practice was profitable in the long term. But I do also think that the people that have engaged in these types of practices kind of knew what they were getting into, and they knew that it had a very short lifespan as well. So that's sort of the first thing. I think the second thing is, if you make your site go public, promoting practices that go against Google guidelines, and you achieve scale and success with them, the chances are that they're going to come after you. They don't like being mugged off. They don't like being embarrassed, basically. And there's been some very famous cases of sites that have publicly done very well, have been hit within 1 to 2 years or something like that. So I think that will always continue. Do not make your sites public. I think, though, the essence of this is that Google are not the police. Your site, it's your infrastructure. You are free to do exactly what you want. If you want to keep doing this, you can. It's just understanding what the risk may be, and then also what your appetite for that risk is as well. And I also think it's important to always consider that SEO is there to generate an ROI. It is a marketing channel. It's there to acquire customers in one way or another. That may come in various different forms. But I think the message is that if what you're doing is working, keep doing it until it isn't. Again, really look deep and ensure appetite for risk. Make sure you're doing things that do promote positive user experience. You're providing good value to the reader, because that will also sort of tick the sort of Google boxes, quote unquote, as well. And I think the final point here, as always, keep creating content, keep building links. I think out of all these updates, those things never change. The ways in which we do them may evolve, they may adapt, they may turn into something slightly different than what they look like now, but the essence is still the same. Keep creating content and keep building links as well. So thank you if you've made it this far. I'm now just going to run through some of my favorite tweets about the subject. So we've got a few sort of hypotheses here, and a few sort of examples of potentially that's some collateral damage as well. So Craig here has said that he hypothesizes that Google is de-indexing AI sites based on publishing frequency rather than actual content, with the idea being that if Google crawls a site and there's 10 pages, 100 pages in there on day one, and then on day 3 there's 1,000 pages, 5,000, 10,000 pages, that's a signal that indicates mass-produced AI content, basically. And again, actually, we should remember that Google doesn't specifically say AI content. It just says mass-produced content that's low value and there to manipulate search rankings as well. So that, from Craig's perspective, would be a signal that would indicate that as well. Again, we're seeing all over Twitter examples of sites being de-indexed. Unfortunately, we are getting a bit of collateral damage from what we've seen anyway, that sites are getting de-indexed even though they are human created. It's an unfortunate symptom of an update in that we always see legitimate sites sort of get hit or deprioritized. So again, it'll be interesting to see how big of an issue that actually becomes in the coming weeks, really. A few other bits here. So yeah, the freshlive.com, 9.3 million visitors a month according to Kashif here. Now out of the index, that's gone straight to 0 from Google. Bit of irony in Mike's tweet here, in that he essentially put up a post complaining about sort of the mess that stroller related SERPs had become, and then in turn, of course, managed to rank for those same stroller related SERPs, which was quite funny. And of course, this is a great one from Gareth, as we said. Don't make Google look stupid. You're asking to be indexed. And I think that there's certainly a lesson that needs to be remembered out of, if anything, out of this update. Don't make things private. Don't talk about the success you get from manipulating search, because you will get claps off of the back of it as well. Mike actually identified, I think it was a site called ZachJohnson.com. Not too sure if he lists it. Yeah, ZachJohnson.com. They were ranking #1 for how old is Taylor Swift's daughter. Spoiler, if you didn't know, Taylor Swift doesn't have a daughter. So again, clearly a page there that has been created for the purpose of manipulating search and generating traffic, instead of actually providing a straight answer to that specific query. GoDownsize.com, another AI site, has been taken out. As I said, there's going to be plenty of these that come up in the coming weeks, and the hope will be that those that have been engaging in these practices knew the risks, and it wasn't something that they solely rely on as their sort of main income or anything like that, because that would be horrible. That could be pretty much 0 overnight. So let's see what happens. Thank you again. I'll likely provide an update on this in the coming weeks. I'll talk about the impacts that we've seen from our own sites, if any, and try and get a bit more of an update as more light is shed in the sort of coming weeks and the coming months in particular as well. So thank you again. If you haven't already, please like the video and please do subscribe to the channel. I'd also be interested to hear your thoughts, your experiences. Have you seen any sites that have also been de-indexed, hit by this new update? Has your own site been impacted? Have you gained from it? I'd be really interested to know. So please do feel free to leave a comment. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next video. Thank you.